Hello and welcome to day 70 of Dungeon 23. Today we're going to be making a room that is loosely inspired by a suggestion I got from my usual D&D people, and it is also based on a monster that was made by, I don't know his actual name, but he goes by the Dungeon Dad. He's just a guy on YouTube who has a YouTube show called Monster of the Week, and we didn't make this monster. Someone made this monster for 3rd edition, and he ported it to 5th edition. And I'm not actually using his stat block. I made my own because I like making my own stat blocks. But his video is where I first heard of this, and then when I got the suggestion, then I decided to just roll with it, and so here we are. So let me just quickly sketch out the room, and then we'll actually see what the actual monster is. Okay, so here's our room. Pretty basic. Of course, reverse symmetry, I guess. I don't know what the actual term is. But I like symmetry. So, we're going to use it. Now, what is our monster? Well, it's going to be a golem. What kind of golem? Aren't golems a bit difficult for this low level? We'll get to that second. And, yes, but this one is more of a puzzle than an actual just thing that you're meant to just fight. And our golem is going to be a plush golem. Specifically, a huge plush golem. If you don't know what a plush golem is, they're a creature from 3.5 edition. And what they are is basically a giant animated teddy bear. Their purpose is that they are created by wizards, and I guess a Golemancer is the name of the person who makes it, or just any kind of magic user. They're made by them. Actually, now that I think about it, it would be a cleric, because golems come from Jewish mythology, and that's a religion, so it should be... Yeah, they should be clerics, but that's besides the point. What's important is that these things are made by magic users for typically, like, aristocrats and wealthy people, which the Forgotten Realms have an ample amount of rich people, because Forgotten Realms kind of is so sanitized to the point where there's absolutely no problems whatsoever. It's just a bunch of people who have access to infinite resources getting along. And those kind of people still need someone to watch after their children. So that's where the plush golem comes in. It's a giant living, well, not living, kind of living, it's a construct. A giant animated teddy bear to watch over your kids. And why is it in this dungeon? Well, the wizard probably wanted one. Knowing the wizard, he probably stole it from a child, because he's an asshole, as most wizards are. So, let us look at the plush golem stat block I made, and then after that discuss how we're going to use them in this room. Alright, so here is our plush golem. Obviously, it's named plush golem. It is a huge construct. Typically, I'd have them, well, but they'd usually be like a size medium or large. But I want this thing to be really big. Mainly so it can't squeeze through the doorways. Now, like most people, I completely forgot about the squeezing rules. So in the last floor, the blind hook horror could, theoretically, squeeze through small rooms, the 5-foot doorways, but we're just going to say it's not going to. But this guy definitely cannot squeeze through the 5-foot doorways. He's simply too big. So, huge construct, because, he's big, and all golems are constructs. Even flesh golems, even though they seem like they'd be undead, but that's not the point. Lawful good, because constructs tend to be lawful, they are designed for a specific purpose, and they will follow that purpose to the ends of the earth. And good, because it's designed to take care of children. It's gonna beat up the party, but it's not gonna hurt kids. And we'll get to that in a bit. Very, very low armor class. An armor class of 8. Now, that's still lower than the Flesh Golem, which is an armor class of 9. So it's really easy to hit, especially considering how big it is. And it has an HP count of 60. Not the strongest golem, but it's still pretty tough for the party, because once we get into its resistances, you'll become clear. For its stats, strength and constitution and intelligence are identical to the flesh golem. It's very strong. It's very constitutional, I guess is the word. It has a high constitution, but it has a much lower dex. Actually, I think dex is the same, only this is a 6 instead of a 9. So yeah, it's the -2 instead of a -1. Intelligence is, I think, the same, -2. Now, its wisdom and charisma are higher. Wisdom only by 1 point, so it doesn't actually give it any kind of bonus. But charisma is much higher. Still, it just levels up to a +0. There's no actual bonus to it. But it's not in the negatives like it was for the flesh golem. That's because, despite how unnerving this giant walking teddy bear is, it's supposed to deal with children. That's what its purpose is, so it's not going to be as creepy looking. Proficiency bonus of 2 because, you know, it's still low level combat. We're not going to give it a super high proficiency bonus. It has proficiency in strength saves, which I did wrong, so we're going to fix that. That should be +6. Because it already does +4. So fix that. It has resistance to cold damage because it's a giant stuffed animal. And that should actually be immunity to poison. Let me fix that too. But also it has resistance to slashing and piercing, unlike other golems, which are simply immune. And that's from non-magical weapons. So you can still damage it with those weapons, it's just not going to be as bad, or rather as dangerous to it. However, it is completely immune to bludgeoning damage, because it's a giant stuffed animal. You hit it, and it just bounces off. It's not going to do any damage. It has no damage vulnerabilities. I was contemplating giving it, like, fire damage is vulnerable. It's vulnerable to fire damage. Decided not to. So it just has no vulnerabilities. And it is, of course, immune to charmed, exhaustion, frightened, paralyzed, petrified, poisoned. All of the golem immunities it gets. Now, in older editions, golems were completely immune to magic, which is insane to think about, but no, it's only kind of totally immune to magic. For its skills, really good athletics, because it's designed to like chase after kids and keep them safe. Decent perception, because it has to, look after them, it has to pay attention to the world around it. Languages, it understands common but doesn't speak. No tools, because it's not really an intelligent creature. And here's its actual abilities. I gave it the aversion to fire that the flesh golem has. So if the flesh golem, and also the flesh golem, if it takes fire damage, it has disadvantage on attack rolls and ability checks until the end of its next turn. So if you hit it with a fire spell, it's going to be flailing around, it's not going to be able to hit you as much, and it's not going to be able to make any ability checks. So if it's trying to grapple you, then it's not going to have a good time doing that. These next 3 things are things that all golems get. The first one is a mutable form. The golem is immune to any spell that would alter its form, also affect. So, polymorph just doesn't work. And I think that's it, really. I mean, other than, like, the lycanthropy curses and, I don't know, maybe wish. I don't know, I'd say wish circumvents this, because it's the highest level thing you can do. But, yeah, other than, like, lycanthropies, which wouldn't even affect it, because it's not a humanoid. Yeah, it's immune to polymorph, essentially. And that is something that all golems get. The next one is magic resistance. All golems, so including this one, have advantage on saving throw against spells or their magical effects. So, any spell you cast at it, well, actually no, the spells you cast at it aren't with disadvantage, but it has advantage on saves. So, if you try to cast Fireball on it, it has advantage on the save. But if you target it with like a Flame Bolt or Firebolt, then it doesn't have, you don't have disadvantage. In other magical effects basically means if it's not a spell, it still has advantage against the save. So I wouldn't really say like monk abilities or the stunning strike and all that crap, which some people do consider magical. I really don't. But things like turn undead, which doesn't really apply in this case, but if this was an undead that had magic immunity, I'd say that yeah, that counts because it's a magical ability. It's holy, but it's still magic. It's divine magic as opposed to arcane magic. And that's where the dichotomy lies. And but there's primordial, and then there's, which is like nature, and that's like what druids and rangers have, but that's a whole different can of worms. The final one that all golems have is the golem's weapons are magical. Basically means the attacks it makes circumvent damage immunities. That isn't really going to affect here because the party isn't going to have like resistance or immunity to magical or non-magical weapons, especially at this level. But that's just par for the course with golems. The final one is more so to tie in the whole idea of it being a basically magic security guard that's designed to be cute and cuddly. That's non-lethal. Whenever a creature is reduced to 0 hit points from an attack, it is instantly stabilized. So we could walk over and just clunk you, and then instead of having to make death saves to avoid dying or stabilizing, you just are stabilized. Now, it only has one attack, which is Slam, which is all golems get, but this guy, instead of doing 2d8 plus 10, or 2d8 plus 4 bludgeoning damage, he just does 2d4 plus 4 bludgeoning damage. And again, if that drops the party member, then they're just unconscious. They're not killed or have to make death saving throws. They're instantly stabilized, so there's no chance of a TPK. Unless the wandering monster wanders in, but in which case the giant freaking golem monster's gonna just beat the crap out of it and throw it away. It's not gonna let that happen, so it's not necessarily a safe room, but it's a room where you can't die in. And it also has a special reaction, which is the first reaction I've given a monster, at least in this series. That is Glare. In response to taking damage from a creature it can see within 30 feet, the golem gives a disapproving look at the source of the damage, forcing it to make a DC 10 wisdom save or be stunned until the end of its next turn. Creatures that are immune to being frightened are unaffected. So basically, if you attack this golem, it just kind of looks at you menacingly, and you're like, oh crap, I shouldn't have done that. And it's basically the idea of like it scolding a kid who like broke something or is like being mean, and so it just stuns them. And the way stunning works is a creature that is stunned cannot move, it cannot communicate, it has either disadvantage or automatically fails strength and dexterity saves, and I think attacks have advantage against it too. So really not a good thing to have, but it's only until the end of its next turn, so it does skip their turn, essentially, but it happens on their turn, or at the end of their turn, as its reaction, so it doesn't feel as bad as if you had your whole turn skipped, because you just went. And because, it's a reaction, it can only be done once per turn, or once per round, and it's on a recharge. Recharge 5/6, which I think we talked about before. At least, maybe the dragon in the previous room. But the way it works is that you roll a d6, and on a 5 or 6, it gets its ability back. And you could still, when it first starts combat, you could just use it, but afterwards, then you have to roll a 5 or 6, and if you do roll a 5 or 6, then you can use that ability again. And that's basically our plush golem. Now, we're going to get into its behavior when we get back to the room, so let's go ahead and do that. And we're back, and I've gone through the liberty of putting in its stats. So it has a name, officially, and it has its health and armor class accounted for, so that's good. Now, how's it going to behave? Okay, so here's our behavior for it. The plush golem will attack any creature that is a size medium or larger that it can see, which basically means most players that are not playing gnomes, halflings, goblins. Alright, I'm sure there's other small creatures, but that's not the point. And if the flesh golem... It's not flesh golem. What are flesh golem? That should be plush. Just put golem. If the golem is reduced to less than half its HP, it's basically just going to give up fighting and go hide in the corner of the room. Or just go sit in the corner of the room and sulk. And let's just say... And here we are. Mending cast on the golem restores HP. Let's just do D4 plus 1. and makes it no longer hostile when I cast it. So basically, if your party's attacking it and it gets damaged and you cast Mending on it, it's going to stop attacking you. And that's basically what it does. It's just a big, violent teddy bear that will beat the crap out of you for just being by it if you're too tall. It's pretty simple, actually. And it's just really goofy. It's more so the idea that the wizard stole a toy from a kid and put it in his dungeon just because he's a scumbag wizard is just really, really funny to me. And I think at the end of the day, funny, wacky goofiness is more important than basically anything else. And that's really the point of the series. So, if you want to see more goofy, wacky randomness, then like, comment, subscribe. I don't know how commenting is gonna make you see more of it, but anyway. Yeah, so apologies for the poor quality. It's not gonna get any better.